It's I think I must have queued it up differently. I think it goes to the beginning.
Good everything. Hello, good morning. Good morning. Why can't you're muted now. Yes.
I'm muted. I muted myself because I was laughing. Good, good everything. What's going on?
Hi.
I'm
Yes, all of that. All of that. And
all of it. All of it.
even starting with comedy, it's like, I've been saying on the air, y'all mess with people that invented chitlins. Like we gonna figure it out. You know what I'm saying? Like, not that that's something we want to eat, but we gonna figure out how to make something delicious, nourishing. All we're gonna, oh, this is what you giving us? Okay, we're gonna figure it out. So it's gonna be in the
That's
comedy, it's
right.
gonna be in the music, it's gonna be in all of the things, and we're gonna find a way to laugh through it because that's healing. At the same time, when I'm watching this, Dr. Carr, and hello to you and everyone, 322 consecutive Saturdays and counting. I was thinking they don't care as I watched those smiling jackals strip rights in Tennessee, as I watched the Pennsylvania folk after people voted, turn around and was like, nah. And they're happy, they're gleeful, they're soulless and happy that they are causing so
Ooh.
much pain. And it's wild to me. Like I almost don't even want to give them the magic to how we get through. I almost don't even want them to know.
They can't. Well, they can know. They can't duplicate it. They don't have the
No, it's
capacity.
not about
Culture.
that. But, I just don't want him to even know the source. It's like,
Well, they've always known the source, right? That's why Eric Lott wrote his book Love and Theft: Black Faith's Minstrelsy in the American Working Class. They've always known the source. They want everything from us, but the burden of being black. And so I don't think they understand. They don't know who we are. They assume we're like them. And as Kendrick said, they're not like us. So it's funny, isn't it, how we react viscerally to statements like that. And I think there is somewhere deep down, there's an underlying recognition that we are not the same. So there's a kind of a nervousness when white folk mouth phrases like, they're not like us. Yeah, you know. Oh, you know.
do are
You
they?
know, don't
Do
you? We
they
just
know?
don't bring it up in polite company. I
Do
think
they
there
know?
are some who
Do they
don't
know?
think there are some who don't think that it's the case. Shout out to Marshall Mathers. But then there are others who I think do know. I think this is what drives their fear. They know we're their parents deep down. And that's why they are constantly trying to be on our neck. Like those little men with those shrunken testicles standing in the Tennessee State House trying to push back against those young people, particularly Justin Pearson, trying to blocking their egress. The smirks on their faces are the smirks of little pieces of men. These are little men. They hide behind their little badges and their guns and their super hats pulled down over their tiny eyes. But deep down, they know that they are confronted with their betters, with their parents. And so that I embrace them for it. I really do. I'm excited. Every passing day, I get more excited about this because I know now that, at some point we have to fight these people. And when we fight, we win. We're going to break their political backs. It's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming. Yeah.
I want to ask you, because I don't spend much time at all in, trying to figure out why horrible people do what horrible people do, you know. But if history is a precursor to all of the other things, it's like, there's a lot of videos going around about Kevin Roberts, and you've talked about it here, and the deep study that he's done on enslavement in Virginia and enslavement in Louisiana. I mean, the deep study and the conclusions that he arrived at, and then to craft a 900-page document to like you study and then you dismantle, and in that is the blueprint, right? So you got to study to dismantle. But it's so weird, like the destructive nature, like to spend all your academic life studying Black folk in this particular way with the goal of destroying Black folk, and you're doing it.
Well,
But if you've studied, then
destroying
you
through
know.
assimilation.
Is it assimilate? But then
Yeah,
who
I think
writes that stuff?
Roberts. Well, I mean, remember, and I'm glad that people are catching on, because we know that social media is not deep study, but that social media in the environment that we're in now, because of technology, is inevitable. So that I think what we're seeing by the fact that more people are now talking about Kevin Roberts because and his dissertation because of the floating head TikTok, which I don't watch,
I know.
but now it's kind of inescapable because it disrupts my study. It disrupts my ability to think, which I think is part of the attraction of TikTok. It doesn't require thinking. It's a visceral kind of medium. But the fact that it has penetrated to that level now, where it's being kind of put out there by people who none of whom have read the dissertation, as far as I can tell, for the couple that I looked at, but they're aware of it now. Just like when Taraji P. Henson said Project 2025 at the BET Awards, and it became a thing. That's a great development. I'm encouraged by it. Now, if they had read the dissertation, and there may be some of these little 60-second or 2-minute or 30-second explainers on TikTok or Twitter that do this. And so please forgive me if you're one of those people. But if you go back, as you said, to July the 13th, 2024, our session number 227, they don't really care about us, ironically. It's funny how the ancestors work, isn't it? If you go back to 227, July 13th, 2024, I encourage everybody to do it. It's there on YouTube. You can find it here in the narrative space. We do a not page by page, but section by section reading of the dissertation. And as we explained, based on what Kevin Roberts wrote, the dissertation, which is in, let me think, what was his dissertation? Atlantic Identities, 1791 to 1804. Toyin Falola was on his dissertation. Actually, his dissertation was entitled Slaves and Slavery in Louisiana, the Evolution of Atlantic World Identities, 1791 to 1804. As we explained there, so I won't go back over this, but what he writes in there ultimately is, and at the time I mentioned not only Rashana Johnson, who was from New Orleans, my former students now at University of Chicago, who writes about this extensively in the first of her two books, her dissertation, she turned to a book on this under Michael Gomez at NYU, which is where she went after she left Howard undergrad, and our own Angie Porter, who writes about this in her first article where she sets out the framework for Africana legal studies. Kevin Roberts is covering the same ground in Louisiana. And what he says is those first generations of Africans who were shipped here, and some of those Africans who come as a result of the Haitian Revolution, who are brought into New Orleans by fleeing whites from Haiti, they are Africans, the Bamana and others, so they're not assimilated. So what he does in the dissertation, over the arc of the dissertation, is show how the longer Africans stay here and are born here and come here, the more they become racialized and Black and part of the polity. So what you see in his dissertation is the seeds for his demonic, religious, fascist politics, which he had the whole time he was writing at the University of Texas under James Sidbury and with the help of Toyin Falola and others. His whole thing is, some of y'all, maybe all of y'all, can stay here, but in order to stay here, you got to get down or lay down. You got to leave that Bamana, that Yoruba, that Efik, that Kikongo, all that. You got to leave that where you can, because the longer you stay here, the more there's a potential for you to be racial. What he said historically, the more you get racialized, and that's what happens in Demarvisi, and that's what happened in Gabriel Prosser. Remember, in the Prosser rebellion, they had divided themselves by divisions as they organized this rebellion, and they had a division that was populated by Africans who were part of the rebellion, but who were born here. Because they said, y'all got a little different perspective. All of us want to be free, but your freedom is kind of not clouded, but informed some ways by your relationship to people. We will cut all their throats. You will too, but you look at them a little different. Roberts understands that. So his whole, when I say assimilation, he said, I don't mind watching you Negroes throw a basketball through a hoop or run a football for University of Texas. I love watching you Negroes as I sit in Northern Virginia. I love watching the Commanders. But you Negroes have to get down or lay down. You can't be separate from us culturally. He's a culture warrior. And so to everybody making TikTok videos and Twitter and all that, it's beautiful. It's great that it's sprayed and loud. take a second maybe to read the thing you're talking about instead of just putting a flash of it there as your floating head talks about, and be a little less authoritative in your commentary, because now that you've opened the door, it's on us to walk through now and think about this, because too many people are confused about the idea that you can be a part of this thing on your own terms. You're not allowed to be on your own terms. We'll let you stay here as long as you get down to what we want. And that's where you see the seeds of it in his dissertation. That's why I wanted to bring it up. So that's what I mean by assimilation.
No, and I wanted to bring it up because I think it's important for us to realize, the reaction, the reaction is the goal. But, the planning should be the goal. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So if I'm unbothered, I'm watching, and it is breaking my heart to see so many elders in pain. There's so many elders in pain because they lived through seeing it go, to get the rights, and then to see the sea turn. But it's not just the machinations of the politics of it. There's a hurt in them. Like, I can't believe these people are doing this. There's a disbelief, and it's painful to watch people's delusions or illusions of whatever this could be shattered. And it's painful, particularly to see the elders who marched and, prayed and did all. And then we're here, where they're basically telling us what they've always thought. And, I feel like at the same time, it's like we have to manage our emotions in this time as well, because we got work to do. And fortunately, we can do it. We have all of the tools.
How do you? Okay, you're right. We managing our emotions is so important, and you're right. I don't take any pleasure in pain. Certainly not for our people. And there are some select few on the planet in whose pain I revel, but that's because they've earned that pain.
True.
But I don't do anything to facilitate that pain, because we know in Africana ways of knowing, when you take action in a way, you have to pay a price for that, even if it's righteous action. So I don't have any interest in that. Although in a pinch and in a circumstance where it's unavoidable, I'm certainly not going to give my life for the life of a devil. But in that moment, that pain, yeah, I feel that pain too. How do you, as you say, what do you think? In what ways should we be thinking about balancing the emotion? And I'm saying this in particular when I look at Justin Jones burning a little paper Confederate flag there in the state capitol. The state capitol, when I was an undergrad, we marched down there and protested and filled up the dome and surrounded the place. And that's how I ended up sitting with the governor of Tennessee at the time, there, Ray McWhirter, negotiating, because it was like, you want to come back down here, man? But so I know that. And I saw, seeing Justin Pearson confronting this punk ass state trooper or guard and dropping the F-bomb several times in there, and then coming into the chamber and delivering a speech. And I'm sure the Hillbilly Horde are going to try to sanction them. They've done it before. Is that, when we think of the emotion behind those moments, how does that fit in your mind to this larger effort that we have to undertake in terms of planning?
When you and others were sitting in and protesting on campuses, you were doing that, and then there was a reaction that resulted in change. I think about the Missouri football team, for example. They wanted to get
absolutely,
and I keep coming back to that, because that to me was the time when everybody should have awakened to the possibility of changing things, not necessarily through politics, but through the thing they love. So when that Missouri football team was in solidarity with the Black students who said this racist president has to leave, it was a Black kid that I think was on a hunger strike. And then the football team said, we are in solidarity. We're not playing. We're not going to play in the next game. It didn't take 2 days for the president to be sat down. And they didn't even have to miss a game, because what they're not going to do is miss a football game. I don't know. The die is already cast as it relates to, people didn't vote, or 77 million horrible individuals decided this was what they wanted. And 90 million said, two wings, same bird, or whatever animated them. It's already cast. They have the House, they have the Senate, and they have the judiciary, which is the Supreme Court, and they have the executive branch, right? All levers of federal, and they have the state houses all throughout the country because, a lot of us don't even care about local elections. We don't understand civically, right? So burning the flag, is that going to change what just happened? Is that going to press people in? Because they were laughing. What I saw, the people that did this were laughing and high-fiving, and I'm sure they were chest bumping. I'm sure they're having a nice, single malt or whatever. They're going to probably go hunting later. They're probably,
no, the hillbillies have a much less developed palate. They're drinking cheap beer and corn liquor, but some of them,
eating somebody's children, whatever they do to celebrate. I read, and we've talked about it much here, 322, that the marches were a culmination of like, we did the back room work already. We already told Lyndon Baines Johnson, no, we're going to show up and you're going to pass these bills because, the pressure, the work has already been done. And so I don't know, is this theater? So I'm going to ask you, because what's the goal? You burn the Confederate flag. That's great. There's some catharsis in it, but how do you change what just happened by doing this? So I want to know what the goal is.
You don't. I don't think you do. In fact, Representatives Pearson and Jones came on with Roland Thursday night. I mean, this is when I'm in town. It's my regular night usually. And so when Pearson came on, I asked him a question. I asked him if these redistricted, the three-way split in Memphis, if it survives judicial challenge. And of course, we know that Derrick Johnson, Kristen Clark, shout out to our sister Kristen, who's now the general counsel at the NAACP. She was on faculty at Howard this past year, and shout out to Howard University. All my law students, they had their recognition ceremony yesterday. Today is graduation at Howard. But I asked Representative Pearson, I said, if these maps stand, what then is the work ahead to convert a gerrymander into a dummy-mander? You've heard Hakeem Jeffries talk about dummy-mander. Dummy-mander, of course, is when you have gerrymandered so thin a margin that a huge voter turnout could not only moot it, but could reverse what you tried to do. I think that's what we're going to see in Texas. They're not going to get those 5 seats. I think that's what's going to happen in Virginia. They're not going to get, regardless of the Virginia Supreme Court, which I, by the way, agree with those who say that the Virginia legislature and the governor should ignore the Supreme Court. It's been done in Ohio. It's been done in Florida. But I don't think Spanberger has the guts to do it. But so I asked him, I said, if these maps stand, what is the percentage of Black turnout combined with a minority of white turnout? Because we know the hillbillies in Tennessee are going to vote for white supremacy, but we also know that a quarter to a third of the whites, maybe even a few more, will in fact not vote for white supremacy. So if Black turnout maximizes over 3/4 to, let's say, 90%, if we could get it up to there, but let's say 80 is, what percentage then would it take to convert that gerrymander to a dummy-mander? And his answer was not, oh, we gotta burn the flag and we're here. No, his voice got quiet and he spoke like a legislator. He said, well, the gerrymandered districts look like it's maybe a 20% margin of victory. So we'll have to organize and we'll have to, okay, see, now you gotta talk like a legislator. I get the flag burning, except I would have brought a real Confederate flag, not a paper one, and burnt the shit out of it right there. And then it would have been a fist fight. Everybody been in jail. But I'm saying, if you're gonna burn a flag, brother, burn a flag. You know what I'm saying? But you know what I'm saying? I ain't mad at you. You had a little flag. That's cute. But I mean, no, burn a flag, brother. They ain't mad at the paper flag. They a little salty. But bring one of them old times there is not forgotten. Bring the stars and bars.
That's right.
The cloth. If you're gonna burn a flag, brother, with the fringe on it. Anyway, let me calm down. Again, this is the moment. But what he let me know, and I've been not ambivalent. I'm fully supportive of all the state and local legislators who are fighting this fight, whatever way they want. But yeah, the sermonic kind of way that I don't.
I mean, but theater, and it actually is not landing now because there's real consequences to this last election, right? Folks can't put gas in their car, can't feed themselves. There are real consequences. Right. So all of the theater, and I love how you were framing it on Urban View Mornings, that it's no longer, this is not about even whites, because when you bring in white and Black and all, this is about good and evil. at this point.
Right.
And in framing it that way, it allows for the 20% not to have to take a side. You know, the 20% of
That's
those
right.
good people who know this is wrong, they don't have to
That's
vote
right.
their whiteness now, because that whiteness is not whiteness at all. It's evil. So
It's
you can
evil.
easily
That's right.
make the case that this is
That's
wrong.
right.
And I don't need to be
That's
in
right.
alignment with wrong just because we share a lack of melanin or whatever
That's
the
right.
construct is, because whiteness is not even complexion, y'all. You already know that.
That's
Shout out
exactly
to
right.
Clarence Thomas and the gums guy
Loving it.
from South Carolina.
Loving it.
Yeah, that part.
Bucky. I mean, Senator Scott. Yeah,
I forgot his
loved
name.
him as a
Oh,
youth.
he's got a lot of
Yeah,
gums.
but I loved him as a youth in Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, the cartoon version of him. But now that he's grown up,
Oh,
meaning making those ways of knowing and use it as a conduit to political action. I mean, when Martin Luther King is sitting in Birmingham, and Fred Shuttlesworth, who seemed to be, he's certainly a candidate for one of the most ornery Negroes in the 20th century, maybe ornery human beings, period, because his head was so hard, it blew up his house, he back out there. When Wyatt T. Walker, Jim Bevel, Shuttlesworth and them are arguing and debating about the functional utility of putting children in the street, the so-called Children's March, or what they eventually craft. And I'll never forget the times I got a chance to spend just a little time, an hour or two here, there with C.T. Vivian, and asking him about, and just listening to him talk about Operation C, Operation Confrontation. That's theater. I mean, you got to have, this is why I said last week, we need some good villains, and we got some great ones now. Some beautiful ones to posterize. It's beautiful to see Kevin Roberts elevated into some visibility, to have people know the name of the nasty piece of work Russell Vought and his bubblehead brother Brendan Carr at the FCC. They come from white supremacy central casting. Their insecurities are literally written on their faces with their bald heads and scruffy little beards, thin lips, and pursed beady eyes. I mean, it's like they came from central casting. It's been a while since we had some good villains in this morality play, but we know that King, and we know that Ella Baker and Septa McClark and Dorothy Cotton. We know Diane Nash, who Representative Pearson mentioned, because he's not from Tennessee. He talked about Minnesota. He talked about Diane Nash and being on the phone with her. But the notion of confrontation is very important. We don't forget that moment when Diane Nash and John Lewis and all those young people in Nashville who were at Fisk and Tennessee A&I, shout out to Tennessee State, who had their graduation a couple of days ago, and all the young people. I saw somebody in the chat and YouTube. I'm looking over at the Mbongi too, and somebody's granddaughter went down there to go to medical school, and they have a program there at Tennessee State where you come into these Levi Watkins scholars. Levi Watkins, he and his brother, of course, Donald Watkins, coming out of Montgomery, Alabama State University, and Levi Watkins was student body president, and he was also a surgeon at Johns Hopkins, pioneering, made the way for a political miscreant like Ben Carson, whose hands are gifted, whose brain, except when you get out of the medical field, seems to have melted. But before Ben Carson, there was Levi Watkins. And so they have Levi Watkins scholars at Tennessee State. Shout out to Ms. Barbara Curry Merle out of Mississippi, who was vice president for student affairs when I was an undergraduate, who was the brain behind the Levi Watkins scholars. Her classmate was Levi Watkins. And so she's continuing to fight. And so those Levi Watkins scholars, the first crop of them graduated at Tennessee State last week. Among them, Anna Anelli, Anelli's daughter, and Ken Anelli. So the whole family was there. She's headed to Meharry Medical College in the fall. That's the pipeline. They're creating Black doctors. And so shout out to Tennessee State University. That's when I'm repping Tennessee State today. Also, I want to mention, as we're talking about this, Dr. Charles Whitman Dabbs, Dr. Charles Dabbs from LA, a Navy veteran who got 2 master's degrees and a bachelor's degree out there. 2 masters came from UCLA, a trained social worker who went back to school and received at Tennessee State University last weekend a doctorate in higher education leadership, who said that he now looks forward to joining a historically Black college as a professor. So shout out to Dr. Charles Whitman Dabbs, who, when he, as a 17-year-old, he was coming out of high school in LA, he said there were no scholarships for Black students in my time. Wait, when is your time, Dr. Dabbs? Well, my time was quite some time ago, because after I left the Navy, I worked in the Veterans Administration and other federal jobs. I had a 50-year career in the federal government in one form or another. And Dr. Dabbs crossed the stage last Friday, shaking the hands and to the cheers of everyone at the age of 85. Dr. Dabbs received his doctorate degree. So, yeah, y'all can't defeat us. We're really undefeated if you really look at it. We've been through a lot of pain, but let's be crystal clear. So I wanted to mention that's why I put on the Tennessee Agricultural Industrial State Normal School for Negroes, established 1912. Y'all can go to hell in the state of Tennessee. We're going to dance with you till your hillbilly feet evaporate. They ain't going to fall off. They're going to evaporate. And so when I asked Justin Pearson about that, and he gave that margin about a fifth, 20% comfortable, that's with people who have voted. But that range is really as high as 36% and as low as 9%. Remember the white girl that ran and got it down to 9% in her district? I think it was the fourth congressional district. But at any rate, it's really irrelevant. If we register, if we vote our numbers, the gerrymander in Tennessee can become a dummy man. There's a lot of Negroes in Memphis don't vote. Tammy Sawyer tell you that. Justin Pearson would tell you that. And I meant to say Justin Jones that I was talking with, not Justice Pearson. Pearson, the one with the afro. Jones was the one who burnt the Confederate flag. But the two Justins, as they're known. So there is a morality play to piece to this. And when Diane Nash is sitting there from Fisk University, she's standing on the steps of the Tennessee, the mayor's office in Nashville, 1960, confronting Ben West, the mayor of Nashville at the time. And she says to him, "Do you think segregation is wrong?" And he says, "Yes. Yes, I do." That's theater. The sit-ins were theater. Operation C in Birmingham was theater. So there is a place for theater. There's a place there, as Miss Hamer, the power of the well-played song. So that's all there. The question is then, how do you surround it, as we're talking about right now? How do you surround it with the organizing, the political action? I mean, anytime that any of us are blessed to sit with members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Courtney Cox or Charlie Cobb or Joyce Ladner or Dory Ladner, any of the members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Matthew Jones, my man Chuck Neblett, any of the members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, they'll tell you the songs fortified us, pushed away the fear, which you never are absent from, but it fortified us. And as I was saying yesterday on the radio, thinking about Alabama, and thinking about Chuck Neblett, the last trip I took before COVID, went to Selma with Fire Rose Teray and Hank Sanders, the powerful attorney couple who in many ways inherited that baton and then passed on that fire and lit the torches of Cliff and April Albright and Natasha Brown and all those who came from or went to Selma with Black Voters Matter. And of course, found there Fire Rose and Hank. And that's the last trip I took before COVID was March, Selma Bridge Crossing, Selma Jubilee of 2020, just as we were starting, Prof. And, standing there with the Snick Singers as they sang Governor Wallace. I love when Chuck Neblett tells that story out of Illinois. Chuck Neblett said that Selma to Montgomery March, we standing on this capitol of the grounds of the state of Alabama, the capital of Alabama. We standing in the steps. And he said, I looked back and saw all them thousands of people, all these Black people and white people, and all these people here for this moment where Dr. King stands on those steps. And he says, how long? Not long. No lie can live forever. Boy, and Chuck Neblett said, I look back on that, he said, Wallace can't put everybody here in jail. And at that moment, he began to conceive what became the song Governor Wallace, one of my favorite Snick songs. And so to be able to stand there with him and with the Snick Singers and be singing right along, oh, Governor Wallace, oh, yeah, you never can jail us all. Governor Wallace, yeah, segregation's bound to fall. Shoo-doo, be-doo, doo-be-doo, shoo-doo, be-doo. Well, I read in the paper just the other day, yeah, freedom fighters, they were on their way. So, I mean, songs have a place, culture has a place. And out of that sentiment, that Selma and Montgomery March, remember, you got Jimmy Lee Jackson is killed, and you see the murder of these freedom riders. Viola Luzo lose her life transporting people back and forth. I mean, it's going to be pain, it's going to be violence, but that fortifies us, and that comes out of our cultural meaning making. So it's important. And they can smile, they can smirk, but every time Fannie Lou Hamer lift off in the song, and 100 or 500 or 35 or 2 people join her, it shot through the soul of whatever they've got left of those devils. Yeah, and that little fear welled up in them, because you know what it is. In your deepest. Yeah. So, but go ahead, Prof, please.
Can we sit there for a minute? Because we started with Roy.
Please.
And
absolutely.
It's that magical element of us. But again, it was in rhythm with the planning and all of that manifested. It wasn't random.
No.
It wasn't random.
But it's the
thing that Kevin Roberts can study until his eyeballs fall out and he won't understand.
He'll never understand it. And in fact, I want him to understand it deeply. I really wish but I know, Tony Falola is one of the great scholars, and academics are funny because they will help people like that. And while they were helping him do his work, he steady had that little nasty thing in his heart, teaching his little religious schools and then moving forward and getting that billionaire money, working at the Heritage Foundation. I want them to understand, because the more you understand, the more you realize you're doomed. So you'll have to get down or lay down. And you're absolutely right, Prof. That's why I mentioned SNCC. They weren't just singing. In fact, they didn't come in singing. They or SCLC King, and there was a bunch of ministers for sure, and they knew how to talk to people and galvanize. Thank God there was no TikTok, and there was no Twitter, and there was no Facebook, and there was no Instagram, and there were no group chats, and there was no electronic instantaneous communication, because at that moment, King in Montgomery, the day after the first day of the Montgomery bus boycott, speaking, he is the TikTok. He's the central point and focus. So when you have that, the vision, the dream, the memory, the aspiration of Nasir Jones, when he says on that Hip Hop Is Dead album in the song Carry On Tradition, when you arrive at your position, carry on tradition. In that moment, King said, I'm here and I'm the guy. There's nobody else talking. The choir has sung. We're all in the rhythm. And when I open my mouth, this better be right. And so in another song from Nasir Jones, another poem from Nasir Jones, he says, what? All I need is one mic. But now there are 1 billion mics, and everybody talking at the same time. So even for Kevin Roberts to have punched through to the floating head TikTok, okay, that means that something else is underneath that. This punch through. It's a reason why we hear 322 and counting. Because consistency, that metronome allows people, and now we can say things like, okay, Kevin Roberts, okay, very good. Go back to this other one and watch, and now you can get the chapter and verse, and it'll invite you to do a little bit more study. But we needed that point of entry, and that point of entry only came because enough people are talking about it now that it caught the attention. So you're absolutely right. They were organized, and they used that cultural meaning making to fuel. And here it comes. This is why in our Africana Studies framework, which we absolutely need a framework serves the purpose of focusing people. That's why we have to have this Africana Studies framework, or some kind of framework which allows us to sort and categorize. Otherwise, we just be talking in the moment. This, that, just no. You got to have a lens of focus. This is what allows us to talk about cultural meaning making, like all those songs, and tie it to movement and memory. Because this ain't the first time we were singing. This ain't the first time we were moving in concert. Moving together collectively in a rhythm is a very powerful thing. And whether you're marching, as our brother Babo Matosha reminds us, into a church from the back of the church in the choir, and you moving from side to side, and you coming in saying, we are soldiers in the army, in the army. Mm-hmm. We got to fight, although we have to cry. Mm-mm, mm-mm. We got to hold up the blood-stained banner. We got to hold it. We got to hold it up until we die. Oh, well, my mother, She was a soldier. And you coming in the choir like that, that's the same. And then you take that song and you marching down the middle of the highway in Mississippi. We are soldiers in the army. You change, we got to fight. Although we have to cry too. We got to fight. Although we have to die. One little subtle change and you marching down. And then you got white people who now they want to march. Okay, you watch this now. You may stumble on that beat for a minute, but you just keep singing. That puts a shockwave through the heart of a cartoon villain like Ross Barnett in Mississippi. Why? Because we coming. Justin Pearson said something the other day in Tennessee legislature. He said, we're here. We are here. I'm from Memphis. It's where my parents are from, my grandparents, my ancestors' bones are buried here. We are here. I respect that. I admire that. I understand that, most importantly. And I also understand that that's not going to be enough, brother. You're going to need an organization. And it can't just be a political organization, a black caucus in the Tennessee state legislature. It can't just be nonprofits and it can't just be the formations that come. It's got to be grassroots. It's got to be bound together by something other than just policy interests. You're going to need a little song in there every once in a while, but it's all got to be blended together with some careful forethought. And so, yeah, we're here the second Saturday in May. Cinco de Mayo just passed, that Battle of Puebla, which we got a chance to talk about. Shout out to Vicente Guerrero, the second president of Mexico in its formation post-Spanish invasion. The first black president in the hemisphere, other than the leaders of Haiti, so it means the second black leaders. And Guerrero, who was president of Mexico in 1829, so years before the Battle of Puebla, where the Mexicans defeated the army, France, and celebrated that victory, which they also tied to the emancipation of Africans. But it was Guerrero and Guerrero's presidency that Mexico said that slavery is abolished. So they were abolitionists long before the United States of America's hand was forced. So passing Cinco de Mayo is important for us to understand because, you know, as I said on the air the other day, you know, I'm passing by one of these many places that had the Cinco de Mayo open parties in the DC area, and I saw a Mexican restaurant, at least it says a Mexican restaurant, and I ain't see no Mexicans. All I seen was American Negroes, by the hundreds, spilled outside drinking. I'm like, so we know how to move together, dancing and music. The movement is there. Now where's the politics? The politics was never ubiquitous. Everybody wasn't in SNCC. Everybody wasn't in SCLC. Everybody wasn't out in Kelly Ingram Park in Birmingham in 1963. Everybody wasn't on the steps of the Nashville mayor's office with Diane Nash and Jim Bevel and all of them. Everybody wasn't there. But the point is that at this point, as this thing begins to become clearer to more and more of us, we now have the opportunity to, as Bobby Seale and the Panthers and them would say, seize the time. The time can be seized, and it's important for us to know that. So, yeah, this is, you know, we passed Cinco de Mayo, and then, of course, Mother's Day is coming up. We've talked about that before, so I won't linger on that, except to wish everyone a beautiful Mother's Day, including a mother in our direct family, Dr. Amin, Sunyata Amin. Her birthday was yesterday. She didn't say nothing about it. I was like, I know she didn't make. She here with us. She's these Tauruses. But yeah, happy birthday, Dr. Amin. Try to sneak that one by on us. Banana told the whole world, told you was gonna do it. Would have done it on the radio yesterday, but she tried to sneak in. So wait a minute. Wait, oh yeah. But at any rate, it's her mama told on her, by the way. Her mom called after we got out the air. So happy birthday to her too. She's a professor over at Duke Ellington School of the Arts here in DC. So happy Mother's Day to everyone. And today is also the birthday of someone who will ring the bell for us. I think about our ancestors. Queen Nzinga Radabisha Heru, born Claudine Parker in St. Paul, Minnesota. Daughter A.B. Parker and Elizabeth Parker out of the Mississippi Delta. And as her father A.B. Said, born in Chula, Mississippi, about 20 miles south of Greenwood. As Nzinga's father would say, you know, he said, we getting out of Mississippi and we going as far north as we can without leaving the United States. And for them, that ended up St. Paul, Minnesota, where her remains were interred at the Elmhurst Cemetery back in 2011. And visited that grave. In fact, when I went up there to speak at the Freedom Fund banquet in NAACP a few years ago in South Minnesota. Angie Porter, who's from South Minnesota, came pick me up at the airport right there near Fort Snelling, where Dred and Harriet Scott were, and Little Crow, and all the people who had been persecuted by this criminal enterprise. And we went over to Nzinga's grave. So Nzinga, happy birthday. She was May the 9th is her birthday. She had Taurus along with the rest of us. So wanted to say that. But as we think about this question of where we are now and this time we can seize, remember that everything ends. Everything ends. You know, it's something we should know. And I forget where I was reading something this week, and I don't even remember the book, but somebody commented, a famous writer, I'm blocking on the name, not an African person of African descent. It was almost like an existential kind of statement. He said that the place we are from isn't there anymore. I know what he means by that. You know, I think we all do. The place that we are from isn't there anymore. Our memory is there, but places change. He said, the place that we think we want to go isn't what we think it is. So the place we say we going, think about that in the season of graduation. Everybody got plans, and it's like you look back after 20 years or 30 years. I had no idea. No, because the place you think you want to go, it ain't what you think it is. Maybe rarely it can be, but mostly not. And where we are right now, we can't stay here. So there's this kind of indeterminacy in a minute. But one thing is for certain, we were born and we're going to die. This physical form, wherever we came from, where we going back to, all of that is in a cycle, and everything ends and everything begins, but everything ends. And so white nationalism going to end too. What we are at is another moment. We've never not been in these moments, but this moment of this dramatic instance where white nationalism overreaches, it's a beautiful thing, even with the pain, because we're poised to confront again the enduring question at the heart of this criminal enterprise. And I call it a criminal enterprise because it's absolutely a criminal enterprise. It was born in blood and destruction of millions of lives and the forced transportation of millions of people and the forced violence against them. And so we are allowed another opportunity to ask this question. How long? As Dr. King said on the steps of Montgomery with Chuck Neville standing there behind him, how long? And white nationalism strain this U.S. political order, this social structure, before the contradiction at the core permanently disrupts the federal system itself. We're here again. It's not getting stronger, y'all. It's getting weaker. The United States of America very well may have peaked in the 1960s. It has been a long decline from then. And that peak in the 1960s was based on another peak in the 1860s that came as a result of us fighting our way out of captivity. But it has always been, as Prav, you and I have both talked to Richard Kreitner, who wrote the book Break It Up, and makes the point. The central theme in American history is fracture, is disunity, not cohesion. And every time this happens, it gets a little weaker. How long? And the King said, how long? Not long, because no lie can live forever. Martin Luther King lived in our lifetimes. There are a lot of people who weren't alive when Dr. King was here, and a lot of people like me and you and a bunch of other people who were. And so this is in our living memory. How long? How long can white nationalism strain the U.S. political order before the contradictions at its core permanently rupture the federal system itself? This is our opportunity, another one. So this week, we're going to trace some of this racially polarized gerrymandering. I embrace you. Do your worst. Because your worst gets us a little bit closer. At some point, we're going to have to fight these people again. And this time, it's going to be a little different. In fact, we will guarantee it's going to be different if we fortify ourselves with the momentum of memory. More on that in a moment. We'll move from the Virginia State Courthouse to the Supreme Court and this anti-Black legislative work in Tennessee and Louisiana and South Carolina and Alabama. We'll talk about all of it in passing. But together, these conflicts reveal that it is organized power. Organized power, and the people had the power. This is what when you read the dissent in the Virginia case, where the white nationalist majority in Virginia, 4 Supreme Court justices appointed by Republicans, 3 by Democrats, including the chief judge. The 4 wrote an untenable political decision this week in Virginia, saying that no means that y'all voted, but us 4 are going to replace your will with ours, or at least we're going to try to. I agree with everyone who has said it. I think that the Virginia legislature and the governor should ignore the Virginia Supreme Court. There's precedent for it. They did it in Ohio. Ohio has a nonpartisan committee for districting. And when the hillbilly horde decided in the Ohio legislature that they were going to draw those maps and not be damned, and the Supreme Court of Ohio ruled 7 times that it was unconstitutional according to the Ohio Constitution, you know what them hillbillies said? Nice, and drew them anyway. Virginia? I know you don't have the guts, Governor Spanberger. I'd like to see Don Scott and Louise Lucas, since they raided your office, Senator Louise, and you know she ready to fight 10 toes down. I bet she been saying that. Ignore them. Redraw the lines. And see that the court got the muscle to enforce the law. Let's see. But, you know, Florida. In Florida, in fact, this week it was reported that the pufferfish, a little man trying to puff himself back up into national relevance, Andrew DeSantis, the pufferfish said, I agree that these maps that we draw in Florida violate the Florida Constitution. I agree they do violate the Florida Constitution. I just don't agree as to whether or not that's relevant. Hey, see, the white nationalists, and they're desperate. I get it. But understand what they're doing right now. And I'm going to continue in a moment. The white nationalists are playing a very dangerous game with their funky criminal enterprise. The enterprise is coming apart at the seams, certainly as the demographics change. By doing this, they are taking a sledgehammer to whatever's left of the illusion of the rule of law in this country. That's why it was good that we started with our brother Roy Wood Jr. Because Roy, in his comedic genius, he's really a political comedian. It's like Dick Gregory became a political comedian. Remember, Dick Gregory is down there in Alabama with Dr. King. Dick Gregory certainly in Mississippi, delivering all those pounds of food and renting planes and bringing all the stuff into Mississippi. Political comedians like Roy Wood Jr., they're not going kiki. Now, they'll tell some jokes to make us feel good but they also make us think. Many comedians do. I won't say most, many comedians do. But when Roy said, black people ain't never been patriotic. Now, if he were giving a speech in the Tennessee legislature, he got to fight somebody. But he did it through the songs. He said, just listen to our music. Now, I won't quibble. It's a distinction without a difference. And I know he set that up to make a certain point. So I won't remind that as we're reading Howard French's The Second Emancipation. We started last week in Nubia. This week, by the way, y'all know in Nubia, the first 4 chapters of part 1, that's what's due as homework for Monday night as we start the Second Emancipation. Remember, Howard says as a young man traveling in West Africa, he came into Ghana and he observed a funeral among the Akan people. And it reminded me of a book that I bought in the shadow of the British Museum in June, the year 2000, when we were there for the Association for ASCAC. We went to London, Paris, and then came back to Chicago, and then Atlanta for the ASCAC African World History Project Symposium. But while we were there, I'm going to go to the British Museum, and I never got to the museum. I'm caught up in all the bookstores outside, and one of the books that I found 26 years ago this summer was the funeral dirges of the Akan people. And Howard writes about in the Second Emancipation in the introduction how he heard those beautiful sounds of these women at the Akan funeral dirge at the funeral, singing those funeral dirges. So, Roy knows that. I know he was making a point. He said, oh yeah, all the songs in Africa were, oh yeah, we're happy to, yeah, that actually, as he was singing that, what it reminded me was the contemporary era anti-apartheid songs that I've been able to witness and also help sing when we were in South Africa, and they would have a big meeting, and Jacob Zuma, who was the president of South Africa at the time, would come in, and then everybody singing, and I'm like, man, it's 10,000 people in here. How the hell everybody know the song? But you can pick the song up quick. I got some favorites. One of my favorites is when they do that toyo, that toy. Amaziloche, Slovo no tambo, slovo no tambo, you marching. Slovo no tambo, slovo no tambo. Joe Slovo, white communist, comrade. He was at the center of the leadership of Umkhonto we Sizwe, the spirit of the nation, where they was blowing up plants, sabotaging places, and bombing. Nelson Mandela was in. That's why they locked him up, in part because he was in Umkhonto we Sizwe. And Joe Slovo, white dude, Communist Party of South Africa, one of the leaders, strategic leaders of the military wing of the ANC. Oliver Tambo, who went into exile, traveled the world organizing, getting money and support for the African National Congress, which had been banned, along with the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania and so many other formations in South Africa. So they sent Tambo out so he wouldn't be in jail. Quite moving to fly into Oliver Tambo International Airport in Johannesburg. It always gives me a chill. And so Tambo, who you see at places like Operation Push with Jesse Jackson, with Stetsasonic on stage too, AFRICA, you see Tambo standing there. So when they sing, Slovo no Tambo, comrade, oh, Slovo no Tambo, and they be moving, Akaziloche, Ghost, and they do it, Ghost, that's that march, the March of the Children in 1976. In Soweto, protesting. We're not going to learn Afrikaans in the school. So there's a place for that feeling. So when Roy was talking about, the music in Africa was happy, yeah, there was a happiness to that contemporary music, brother, but it was backed by force. And there's also a sadness in that music too, which are the roots. So when he says the blues were created in America, that's not African. I would absolutely disagree, and I would absolutely agree. It's both, brother. As Edward Kennedy Ellington, as Duke Ellington said, he said, I don't call my music jazz. It's music with an African foundation interpreting an American environment. As Gil Scott Heron said, the blues were created here because America gave us the atmosphere. In other words, yeah, you took that Africana ways of knowing and cultural meaning making and interpreted the social structure we found ourselves in. So after laying that foundation, Roy then says, we ain't singing no patriotic songs. He said, if Black people would tell you specific places in America where you could have a good time. California knows how to party. He started naming, and then where you started, Prof, which was not the beginning, but came about 4 minutes and 10 seconds in, was actually good to give us a little taste of that, because he goes on in that routine to focus in on James Brown. And he said, his uncle was like, yeah, what about Living in America? And Roy was like, yeah, Living in America, that's not a patriotic song. What you mean? Listen to Living in America. He started naming cities. He said, you're right. That's exactly right. And he goes on to say, Georgia in my mind, he said, it was on his mind. He said, but if you listen, if you had asked Roy, where in Georgia? He said, there's some places in Georgia you shouldn't go. Think about this gerrymander. I ain't lost the plot on gerrymander, y'all. He says, if you ask Ray Charles where in Georgia to go, if you go, he's going to tell you Atlanta, where the players play. And then he goes into the whole hip hop thing. So Roy is brilliantly making the point that we don't give a damn about the polity. And you're not going to catch us proud to be in America, where at least I know I can put my feet in a reflecting pool in front of the Lincoln Memorial that y'all let Bozo paint blue at the bottom because his gauche, no culture having ass is loose in the American streets. And y'all not stopping him. He done knocked down a third of your house and dumped the stuff on a golf course here in the Potomac area where now it's poison in the ground. And he done gone and painted the bottom of the reflecting reflecting pool blue. Hey, I love it. Do it, Bozo. Do your worst. I'm enjoying this. Tear the place up because I ain't got no investment in it. And while people were laughing, you looking at Roy Wade Jr., guess what he told you? We ain't got no investment in it either as a national concept. We'll tell you where to go, where it's safe. Because in that routine, as he goes on talking about Georgia and Ray Charles, and you say, if you press Ray, he's going to tell you go to Atlanta, or maybe Augusta, or maybe Savannah, or maybe Columbus, some of the other places. But he said there are places in Georgia where you don't want to be caught after sundown. And guess what? Y'all hillbillies in Georgia, you hillbillies in Tennessee and Louisiana, you hillbillies in South Carolina and Alabama, you hillbillies in Mississippi, y'all can draw districts till you turn, I don't know, I guess you would have to turn a color since the color you are now really isn't a color. Until you turn a color. You can draw those lines, but guess what? At some point, you're going to max out on your capacity to gerrymander. And if we all do what we need to do, that gerrymander can be converted, much of it, maybe not all of it, but certainly much of it, into a dummy mander, you dummy. Because now what? Guess what? It's 30% of us in this new district you drew, or it's 15% of us in this new district you drew. And you thought you were safe, but now we all registered, and now we got to fight this voter suppression issue, y'all, because it's a two prongs to this Read Project 2025. And once we all show up, and it's going to take some convincing. because we got people who are completely checked out. And because we are checked out, we're not understanding what's at stake. And so this is where we are now. We have to push that. But if we can do that, we can convert a lot of these places they think they've drawn into safe districts into unsafe districts for them. Unsafe at any speed. I'm going to take these earplugs.
You're muted. Yes, I'm mute.
Thank you. All right, here we go. I took that. I just want to say I'll put them back in a minute. So we can do something politically that we haven't really considered, I think, when we think about this. So let's take a moment here to think about these things, echoing what Roy did there and his reflections on the centrality of, let's just call it Black locality, where we are. That's our governance formation, who we are to each other. That Black-led, that African-led human rights movement of the Second Reconstruction of the 1950s and 60s. That Second Reconstruction, with the first being, of course, the period between 1865 and close to the last third of the so-called 19th century, which is why the 19th century, by the way, just a footnote here, is so very important to study. There's a reason why John Henry Clark and Jacob Carruthers and all the folks, Larry Crow and them, look at the 19th century as the heroic age. I feel the same way about it. Black folk have always been heroic, but that 19th century, see, we had just come. No, let me go back before the Civil War. We were under the whip. You know what that whip produced? It produced Araminta Ross, who we know as Harriet Tubman. It produced Fred Douglass and Martin Robeson Delaney, whose birthday was the 6th of May. Stay tuned. In about a month, we'll be heading to Ohio for the Martin Delaney Symposium. Shout out brother Larry Kwaku was on the radio in Atlanta with Baba Oshie yesterday talking about the Martin Delaney birthday. He just passed his birthday. That whip period produced Henry Highland Garnett and Sojourner Truth. It produced these heroes, David Walker. Understand Mariah Stewart. Understand that whole army that led the Black Convention movements. That period of the whip produced John Brown. So after Dred and Harriet Scott, after the Civil War, during the Civil War, when we fought our way out of our captivity, that Reconstruction period produces Robert Elliott and Robert Smalls, who knew the whip, who understood captivity, and then who dressed and went in the legislature. In fact, let me see. In fact, today, this week, while I'm out here grading papers and trying to finish up business at Howard, I've been hunting this one for a long time. This is volume 1, number 1. Freedom Ways. Freedom Ways magazine. This is the spring 1961 issue. I don't have all the Freedom Ways. I'm getting close to all of them, but this was one that took me a few years to track down. I finally got it. And of course, this is the first thing they introduced there. Hail, workers of all lands on this May Day. May Day is what people think Labor Day was supposed to. It was May Day. And they say there is music in the air and the perfume of spring flowers. There is laughter of children and the happy call out of adults. The earth trembles because of the millions of marching feet in unison, united in joy. For this is May 1st. From here in America, we send you warm greetings and lift our hands in salute, remembering that 75 years ago, in our own Chicago, for the first time, workers marched in parade on May Day. And it goes on. They want an 8-hour working day, a decent living wage, the dignity of labor, which Dr. King talked about all the time, the dignity of labor. And then to echo what Justin Pearson said on the Tennessee legislature this week, as the hillbilly horde tried to carve up his city, he said, "We are here." Well, guess what the first words in Freedom Ways are? Let me see if I don't want to split the spine here. We are here. See the editors? The editors there, those 4 people right there, Shirley Graham Du Bois, William Alphaeus Hunton, and you see Margaret Burroughs, the founder of the Ebony Museum, along with her husband, Charlie Burroughs, now known as the DuSable, Dr. Kim Delaney, and Esther Cooper Jackson, the managing editor. These are the 4 and the masthead. It's a journal. John Clark would join them soon thereafter. Conceived of necessity and with impetuous ardor, born in travail, this newest, youngest publication is yet a lusty, bawling infant. I love how people write when they got command of words. ChatGPT can't do that for y'all. Young people, listen. Says, this is a good world and a good time in which we are born, for we are African American, and our name is Freedom Ways. This is 1961. SNCC was founded the year before, also the year that Dr. Du Bois, Shirley Graham Du Bois, gave the keynote speech at Johnson C. Smith University, when the meeting of the Black social science teachers, and she gave the evening speech and he gave the luncheon speech, whither, now, and why. He said these laws gonna change. They hadn't changed yet, y'all. It's 1960. He gave that speech a month before SNCC was started in North Carolina, the same North Carolina at Shaw. So when we think about where we are now, come on, y'all. Not only we ain't never been here before, we've been here before. Come on. It's important to understand it's our time to get that heroic age. And here's Shirley Graham says, here the editors say, in scope, militancy, and the effectiveness of the Negro freedom movement is attaining maturity. This act of determined effort to walk with dignity is the most vital reality in Negro life today. The dignity is coming back up, y'all. Jamie Harrison, my man Jamie Harrison, found his voice. You know what he told him? He said, well, I've been saying it for 10 years. And a lot of other people have been saying it longer than that. And we certainly saying it now in the age of name, image, and likeness, where you can get your bag wherever you got it. That's got to be your priority as an 18 or 19-year-old. I ain't mad at you. Actually, I am furious with the diseducation your parents gave you. But I also understand that we need money to live. So I ain't mad. But I'll say this. Jamie Harrison, after they talking about carving up South Carolina and doing all this, thanks to the starting whistle blown by Sam Alito. We're going to talk about Sammy in a minute. Sammy the baby bull. Jamie Harrison said, well, maybe he put out on social media. Maybe I don't think that any Black athletes should come to SEC schools. This is Jamie Harrison, Columbia, South Carolina. And guess who's got the baddest SEC sports team in SEC right now? Arguably is Dawn Staley and the University of South Carolina Gamecocks. God bless you, Dawn. I'm 10 toes down for you, Philly style. But let's be clear. You can leave and your players can leave with you. You can come back to Temple. Or UVA, I know you got roots in South Carolina. I ain't mad at you. Congratulations as well. I saw one of your former players is now the coach at North Carolina Central. That Dawn Staley coaching tree has been penetrating HBCUs and continues, with news this week that one of her former students is now the head women's basketball coach at North Carolina Central. Go Eagles. So all of this speaks to the fact that we are now in another moment where we might sound like we were in 1961. Jamie Harrison, of all people. Jamie Harrison, who couldn't take out little Lynn Graham when he ran for Senate, who ran the DNC but wasn't as husky as he needed to be, who you yourself have interrogated to discomfort with questions he had to be asked. Now found enough voice to say, y'all shouldn't be playing at the SEC. And I've said that a million times, but let me adjust what I said, and I think suggest perhaps that you adjust it too. No decent human being of good conscience should be sending a grant and aid at Louisiana State University. Throw a ball through a hoop for Kim Mulkey, or run up and down a football field with that little affirmative action coach whose name I won't even mention, who seems to continue to fail upward from California to Mississippi and now to Louisiana. I don't care how big your bag is in Texas. I don't care how big your bag is at the University of Tennessee or Alabama. I don't care how big your bag is. There are bags in Columbus, Ohio. I got 2 degrees from Ohio State, and I don't give a damn if they ever win a game again. I wouldn't go to the football games, even as I told the students that I had when I was in graduate school, teaching Introduction to Africana Studies, and those students who I loved them, Scotty Graham and all them boys. Scotty stayed and got 2 degrees, including a master's degree in African American Studies, but I never saw him take a snap for the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'm not coming in that stadium. I protested outside of it. So maybe you go to California for UCLA, which this week was sued by the Justice Department because a white man said that somebody not white got in my seat. Oh, yes. Maybe it's time, maybe not to go to California either. Maybe it's time to go to an HBCU. You want to stay in South Carolina? Go play for South Carolina State. Those students seem to have some courage. Go get you some courage. Now you have to get your NIL somewhere else, but guess what? You can do that. Somebody's got to do it. It ain't gonna be most of these athletes initially, but you hillbillies keep it up. What you gonna strike is a rock, because even the least politically conscious person of African descent has dignity. And y'all gonna keep this up till you hit their dignity. And one of y'all gonna put your hands on somebody or knock somebody's grandma down in your zeal, your smirking zeal, and you're gonna find out that her grandbaby is a 6'2" stretch forward who's thinking about coming to the University of Mississippi and decided she gonna sign a grant and aid with UConn instead, and then you're gonna be mad. But guess what? That's the beginning of your hurt and anger, because once one or two of them do it and it becomes the trendy thing to do, it might not last 10, 15, 20 years. The civil rights movement, after all, lasted a good decade. Let's say half that. 5 years of that? Oh, watch how quick you hillbillies start singing a different tune. But by then it will be different, because see, one thing about young people, when they get in their mind the right way to go, they usually don't stray from it. Ask those SNCC veterans now in their 80s who were on that battlefield when Shirley Graham and W.E.B. Du Bois and Margaret Burroughs and her husband W.E.B. Du Bois and William Alphaeus Hunting put together the Freedom Ways. Let me go right quick to Dr. Du Bois. Du Bois posthumously published, Shirley put this in the first issue of Freedom Ways, Volume 1, Number 1, Spring 1961. It's called The United States and the Negro, W.E.B. Du Bois. You can't go wrong with Du Bois. Shout out to my Philadelphia Freedom Schools folk. Brother Samir and Sister Milele Sullivan and my colleague at Howard, my protege, my replacement to upgrade, Shanice Thompson. We're all meeting this week. We were meeting this week, and now, and also Anshere Hines, my protege. She's working with another cluster of Freedom Schools, and everybody in Philadelphia Freedom Schools on all the sides. So we're talking about everybody, but Baba Sharif and the Center for Black Educated Development are reading Du Bois again this summer, reading The Education of Black People. Couldn't be happier. You can never have enough Du Bois, as Shanice said yesterday. She said you can never have enough Du Bois. But this is what Dr. Du Bois said in 1861. In 1961, it's published. He makes transition in August 63, so it wasn't posthumous. He gave them this to them. He says, in 1861, the legal status of the American Negro was something like this. This is right at the beginning of the Civil War. He says, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, in an obiter dictum, in other words, not central to the decision, had just said that historically the Negro has, quote, no rights which a white man was bound to respect. That, of course, is the 1857 Dred Scott decision, Roger Taney. Du Bois goes on and says, neither a horse nor Frederick Douglass could get an American passport for travel. This is the genius of command of language. Du Bois is being comedic and also at the same time trenchant. The shade is delicious. He said neither a horse nor Frederick Douglass could get neither a horse nor Frederick Douglass could get an American passport for travel. Mules and men were sold at auction in southern cities. Nice nod there. Here he's on there, Hurston. And while Bob Toombs' threat to auction slaves on Bunker Hill was unpopular, the Toombs circuit in Georgia, I worked on that circuit when I was a clerk at the Legal Defense Fund, the act would not have been illegal. Du Bois writes, white Americans shuddered at miscegenation. Yet in 1861, there were 2 million colored women who had no right to refuse sexual intercourse with their white owners. Would you call that rape, President Jefferson? You didn't have sex with a cow or a sheep or dog. You had sex with a woman, and yet you called her property. Let's dance, TJ. We're going to dig your Virginia ass up too. Continues. He says, white Americans shuddered at miscegenation. As I said, he said that these masters exercised this right was shown by 588,000 mulattoes in 1860. The thing about Du Bois is he's going to slip that quantitative thing in, but he's going to write it in between the poetry. My God. He said, kidnapping of free Negroes in the North had been made easy by the fugitive slave law. All agreed that the Constitution recognized slavery as a legal institution and that the government was bound to protect it. He goes on. But I'm going to go to the end because I want to continue. I just want to mention it because we're in this context. He says, he goes into the work of where they were by 1860. He said, a civilized nation could not continue publicly to murder one Negro each week without giving him a trial. It looked as if the chief industry of white women in the South was that of being raped by burly Negroes. The white women themselves at last protested, and an anti-lynching law was nearly forced through Congress, but finally failed. This is after World War I. He goes on and says, then the front of the tech changed. Trusts appeared and organized wealth disguised in corporations began to take over control of the nation. So he's talking about the rise of capitalism. By the way, news this week that the younger Murdoch brother, James, not Nachline, but the younger Murdoch brother is now looking like he's going to make a bid for Vox Media. You know, he published New York Magazine, which I subscribe to. Vox, the website, the documentary makers, the news channel. It's like Murdoch's going to purchase it. But before people say, Murdoch, no, it's James, the younger one. If you read the Atlantic Magazine long article on the Murdochs, this was from maybe spring, maybe June 2025, front cover article on the Murdoch family and the beefs in between. It's interesting. But the point is they all got money, whether their politics are ultra left or far right white nationalist. They got the money to do that. Would James purchasing it be better? Would Netflix purchasing be better than Paramount if they were? Well, yeah, but it's all billionaires. And Du Bois in 1961 says, trusts appeared. It's the money people. And organized wealth disguised in corporations began to take over control of the nation. They seized the West Indies, Central and South America. They consorted with Imperial Europe. When imperial colonialism drove Europe to war, 1915, Du Bois's essay, The African Roots of the War, the United States found it could make money by following. The First World War came and posed the fundamental question of Negro citizenship. The Supreme Court, after years of hesitation, sustained it, but the Negro was allowed to go into war as a stevedore rather than a soldier. Shout out to the 369th of New York, the old 8th Illinois, the 370th of it. In other words, yeah, you a citizen on paper, and we going to fight, but you're going to go in basically like a slave and not a citizen. He goes on, treated with every indignity. After this war, World War I, came wild speculation and severe depression, 1929. Bozo, we're coming in this now. The grift, the whole thing, from Warren G. Harding to Herbert Hoover. All your little funky buddies, teapot dome scandals under Harding look like nothing compared to the Trump crime family. BP, the international killer, bombing Lebanon, bulldozing Gaza. And here come dead man suit Jared Kushner and the crypto king, Steve Witkoff, pocketing dough. The United Arab Emirates leaving OPEC. Why? Getting a little closer to Israel, trying to game out what the future holds. The Saudis telling Trump momentarily, you can't launch your attacks on Iran from here because y'all messing up our money. All of it being driven by the very thing Du Bois is talking about, private capital animating this. He goes on, after this war, wild speculation and severe depression, Franklin Roosevelt, with Harry Hopkins, began to socialize the nation. This is what they mad at, y'all. I'm bringing all this together in a minute. Capital is terrified of this. The New Deal, you going to take our ill-gotten gains and the profits we trying to claw and give it to all the people? Hell, that's like the Supreme Court of Virginia saying, I know a bunch of millions of y'all voted to redraw these districts, but damn it, us four put in place by these billionaires are going to say no. And we're going to see whether or not you're going to lay down for it, even though the will of the people is how we got put in these places in the first place. Understand what's going on here. It is a response not to the Second Reconstruction of the Civil Rights Movement, yes, in part by the racists, but really to the New Deal politics of the 1930s and 40s. You're not going to steal from us because we stealing from you. What is this federal bank insurance that you want to put? What is this social security you're talking about? What is this expansion of healthcare? What is this whole concept of the 8-hour workday and protections for organized labor and collective bargaining rights? Oh, hell no. They are fighting not just to roll back the 1960s, but the 1940s and 30s. They want to go back to the robber baron era. And so Du Bois continues, he says, after this war came wild speculation and severe depression. Franklin Roosevelt with Harry Hopkins began to socialize the nation in order to beat back the power of the trusts and industrial monopolies. They did not wholly succeed, but they began just as the unexpected Second World War burst on civilization. So finally, he says, in this Second World War, the Negro was registered in the ranks of the Army and the Navy and the Air Force, and their success only made clearer their caste condition in this nation. This, in the succeeding Cold War, became so threatening a phenomenon that the Supreme Court in 1954 declared race discrimination, especially in schools, unconstitutional. The former slave South was furious, but was soon appeased by the assurance that the decree would not be enforced. The South could use deliberate speed, which meant do little or nothing. That again aroused the Negroes. It led to bus strikes like that in Montgomery and to student sit-ins where the Negroes began to assert rights which had never been taken from them by law, but only yielded to in custom. This still goes on. We've been here before. He says, the world regards us with amazement. We are leading the free world. He's talking about black people. He says, we champion democracy, puts it in quotation marks. And for this, we stage Little Rock, drive Negroes from the polls, chase black students with bloodhounds, and throttle free speech. On top of this, Africa arises, and our FBI trains a Peace Corps to guide it. That's Freedom Ways, 1961. Du Bois is giving us the platform and the foundation for understanding where we are today. These rich bastards, global bastards, have no respect for the lines of a country, a state, a city, a polity. They are after one thing and one thing only, to crack the marrow of your lives and extract from your lives whatever surplus value they can take for themselves. And understanding that, you will understand why they must expend billions of dollars to convince poor whites that it is better for them to hold on to an intangible illusion of whiteness than it is to have teeth in their mouth. It is better for them to hold on to an intangible illusion of whiteness than it is to cure a tumor that was once curable and now is incurable. But the last thing on their breath as they die is, nigger, I'm better than you. Understand, you got to continue that illusion. Du Bois blew this up for most of the 95 years of his life. When he writes about it in 1935 in Black Reconstruction in America, 16 years before this is published in Freedom Ways, he's trying to help us understand he's not alone. But I'm bringing him up today because it's a painful but powerful reminder that in this moment, we've got a little crack where the thing is beginning to become apparent to more and more of us, and we have a responsibility. Let's begin to wind this up by looking at some of the things that have happened this week and putting them in context. We know that Supreme Court case. Don Scott, in his official capacity as head of the representatives in Virginia, House of Representatives, and of course his counterpart in the House of Delegates, Louise Lucas, who was attacked by a weaponized Department of quote unquote justice, Bozo and his friends, and his little funky friend who wants to be the permanent attorney general there at the top of with his slit mouth. Anyway, let me stop. The white nationalist majority on the Virginia Supreme Court invalidated the referendum. Millions of people voted. And when you read in fact, I'm going to read from it a little bit now. The white nationalist majority in Virginia, understand what happened. The white nationalist party in Virginia has been fighting not to have this referendum since it was proposed. And there's a very simple process. According to the Virginia Constitution, there's a statute and pursuant to the Virginia Constitution that says this is how you amend the Constitution. Because in the Constitution, as you set up this independent, the Virginia statutes pursuant to the Constitution on elections and on districts, because states control time, place, and manner of elections, including federal elections. So you saw, for example, this week, and I'll come back to Virginia, a hillbilly judge at the district court level said that the thieves, including Tulsi Gabbard, who stole those ballots from the 2020 election that were in the hands of Fulton County, Georgia, can keep the ballots for now. So they've thrown all the law out, which I kind of encourage because it's going to strip people from the illusion that the law is somehow inviolate and just enshrined in a way that can never be used as in whatever way that politics wants to use the law. Back to Virginia. In Virginia, the Virginia Constitution, pursuant to the Virginia Constitution, Virginia passed a law that says if you want to amend the Constitution, you have to go through a 3-step process, really a 4-step process. Step 1, stage 1, you've got to vote on an amendment in the Virginia legislature, which they did. They have a nonpartisan redistricting commission in Virginia, like they do in Ohio. And that nonpartisan commission says, we will draw the lines in a way that's nonpartisan. So it's even, Republicans, Democrats. And it deadlocks often. I think there's 16 people on the Virginia Commission. Remember, the Ohio Commission said that, no, these lines that you hillbillies want to draw, You got even number of hillbillies and non-hillbillies on this commission, and then people sued, and they said this is unconstitutional. The Supreme Court said of Ohio said this is unconstitutional 7 times, and them hillbillies ignored the Supreme Court of Ohio. I encourage Virginia to do the same. Step 1, introduce the amendment in the legislature. Okay, so they wanted to amend the nonpartisan redistricting commission to draw a 10-to-1 map. Political gerrymander. Supreme Court said that they can't get involved in political gerrymander. It's non-justiciable, as we talked about last week and many times before. So they shouldn't be in this SCOTUS, right? We'll get to SCOTUS in a minute because Ketanji Brown Jackson set natural fire to that racist Sam Alito this week. We'll come to that in a minute. So you got to introduce it in the legislature, which they did. We want to suspend the redistricting commission until at least the next census. That would mean the election of this year, the election of 2 years from now, and election for 2 years from that. Okay? So 26, 28, and 30. After that, maybe we revert back to the thing. In other words, Virginia ain't trying to do this for time immemorial. They're not like, let me think, Texas. Anyway, the point is that they introduced it, step 1. Step 2, there has to be an intervening election. That's what happened last November when they swept governor, attorney general, House of Delegates, and the House of Representatives in Virginia. Okay, they swept. There has to be an intervening election. Stage 3, the legislature must now vote again on the amendment that they proposed, which they did. That's when Louise Lucas was like 10-to-1, baby, 10-to-1. All them hillbillies was mad as hell. And then stage 4, the legislature can now go to the voters via referendum. Okay? Is everybody clear? That's how you do it. That's how they got to where they had to vote. Now, the white nationalists, the minute they voted the first time, the white nationalists went to the court and said, hey, nah, it's too close to the intervening election. What does that mean? And the people in Virginia legislature was like, it ain't too close. No, it's not too close at all. In fact, let me be very clear about this. The election is in November. We introduced this. The hillbilly horde said, nah, the election started with early voting. So then they say, we're going to sue. So fine, go up to the Supreme Court. You know what the Virginia Supreme Court told them after it went all the way through? Go ahead with the election. Wait, what? So the thing y'all call yourself invalidating this week, you told them to go ahead. Oh, wait till you see what these hillbillies wrote in the MAGA 4 majority opinion, that the minority opinion, including the Chief Justice, roasted. I'll tell you now, because for the sake of time, we're going to kind of wrap this up in a minute. They said, well, we couldn't rule on the substance of whether or not it was constitutional until there was a law to rule on. You could have stopped this, man. Millions of dollars later, millions of votes later, you could have stopped it on, since this was a procedural, get this, the whole Virginia decision that they made this week, these MAGA 4, hinged on what it means, what the word election means. We'll come to that in a second. Step 1, vote on the amendment. They did that. Step 2, intervening election. That's what happened in November. This is what the hillbillies went to court after they had voted the first time and said it's too close to the election. They said, no, election day is in November. We are within the window. No problem. Step 3, the legislature got to vote again, which they did. Step 4, they put the referendum on the ballot. The white nationalists have been fighting it all along. Now, the Supreme Court makes the decision. They say that voting meant that the election was already underway with early voting, and the initial legislative vote was too close to the election. That's what the Supreme Court just ruled that they could have ruled on before. But guess what? Does anybody in the world believe that if the White Nationalist Party had defeated the referendum and the Democrats had gone and said, nah, do you think that the Supreme Court of Virginia would have invalidated this election? Of course they wouldn't. This was a straight political decision. They waited to see who was going to win. Then their little hillbilly friend in Southwest Virginia says, I'm not going to certify the election. Then they sprung in, and if you listen to Jay Jones, the Attorney General of Virginia, he said, we're going to argue. Okay, yeah. But guess what? They was waiting on y'all. We just want to see, did we win? No, we didn't win. Okay, we got y'all. Hey, Hillbilly Sam, yeah, down in Tazewell County. Okay, no certifying. Okay, now we make our move. Y'all don't like it, prove it different. Because this shit y'all wrote, this little opinion y'all wrote, and everybody can read the opinion for yourself. Even if you're not a lawyer or legal scholar, you can read it. It's clear what happened. The Democrats arguing that the election is election day, as stated in, it is explicitly stated in the Virginia Constitution and in the statute, the amendment statute. This is what the dissent does. They say, what is an election? Election day is election day. It says it in the Constitution, the plain language. But when you read the majority opinion, they try to address the dissent, but really they focus down on dictionaries. What is it? What is the plain meaning? What is a citizen? Nah, buddy. This is the move white nationalists do now. They now start going to dictionaries. This is what they did in the abortion case. This is what they do in the voting rights case. They start saying, well, the plain meaning of the word. No, I ain't looking at the plain meaning of the word. I'm looking at the legislative history. I'm looking at the plain meaning of the statute. You mean you're not going to read the plain language of the statute? Oh, yeah, I'm reading the plain language of the statute. But what does it mean? This is what they're going to try to pull with birthright citizenship. In other words, the law is a mirage. If you've got the numbers, you run a Boston. If you got the numbers, you run a Boston, you make up some shit. I know it sounds terrible. There's a lot of lawyers here. I know Barbara Russ is here and so many others, Mike, everybody here, Angie, y'all know, I know, I know. But I also know that we're at a point now where power has to be asserted to overrun, because what they are doing is taking a sledgehammer to the idea of the rule of law. And once they have wrecked it, my friends, which is why we're here week after week after week, not to oversimplify, but to make in plain language something clear that you can now go investigate for yourself. Come in on Monday nights, have a conversation. Am I wrong? Let's talk about it, but let's be clear. When you put it in plain language, maybe somebody makes a Lego video. I don't know. Ron ain't the only one can make Lego videos, right? Walking people through this. Hey, watch out now. Because now the illusion, once it's drawn, it can't be ignored. It can't be unseen. The same themes. In fact, I said I was going to read from it. So let me just go over here for a minute. I'm going to go to the opinion from the dissent. This is Chief Justice Powell, with whom Justice Mann and Justice Fulton join in dissent. This court has long recognized, this is the dissent, this court has long recognized that our, quote, Constitution is certain and fixed, quoting Staples versus Gilmer from 1944, which is quoting Van Horn's Lessee versus Durrance from 1795. It contains the permanent will of the people, and therefore its meaning can only be altered by the people. This is where I say y'all should ignore the court. The will of the people was spoken in the election. It says, notwithstanding this bedrock principle, the dissent writes, this is the Chief Justice writing, today the majority has broadened the meaning of the word election as used in the Virginia Constitution to include the early voting period. This is in direct conflict with both how Virginia and federal law define an election. Under the facts of this case, I believe the circuit court erred, and I respectfully disagree with the majority's conclusion that the General Assembly did not strictly comply with Virginia's constitutional requirements. For this reason, I respectfully dissent. Now, he quotes here Article 12, Section 1 of Virginia Constitution. Let me quote it here. Well, I'm quoting Moore versus Pullum, which is quoting. It says, the general rule is that unless the Constitution, either expressly or by necessary implication, inhibits the General Assembly from providing how a voter shall exercise his right to vote, its power is absolute. If there be no restraint, the General Assembly unquestionably has the power to determine the manner of conducting and making returns of elections. The framers of the Virginia Constitution, however, were not content to leave this question to be controlled by this general rule, but have specifically expressly recognized and emphasized this power and directed the General Assembly to exercise it. I'm saying that to say that what they're saying is that the Constitution gives the legislature the power to determine all of this. And in determining it, this is what the dissent says. The General Assembly, in turn, has exercised this power through Title 24.2 of the Code of Virginia. Under code, this is the law. Under Code Section 24.2-101, the General Assembly has specifically defined a, quote, general election. Here's the definition in the damn statute, the law, which the Constitution says the General Assembly has the power to enact. Here's the law, y'all. A general election as an election held in the Commonwealth on, the word on, which they put in italics, the Tuesday after the first Monday in November, emphasis added, end quote. The use of the simple preposition on to form the prepositional phrase on the Tuesday after the first Monday in November definitively establishes that the General Assembly intended to exercise its constitutional power and limit general elections to a single day. the General Assembly intended for general elections to cover multiple days, it would have used a complex preposition, such as ending on, to indicate that an election started at some earlier point in time rather than occurring solely on the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. However, quote, we regularly reject invitations to read into a statute language that is not there because of the long-established rule that courts cannot add language to a statute the General Assembly has not seen fit to include. Then they include the table of cases, a bunch of cases. My point is this. Let's just think about this for a second. Look at the irony of this. Because I'm a big advocate of this, and I think we all should be. Early voting, I think everybody should early vote. And then on election day, you show up at the poll, ain't nobody there. Why? Because we already voted. That does not mean that election day isn't the day of the election. Hence, I don't know. Let me think of the adjective. Oh yeah, early voting. Yeah. The Virginia Assembly took the position that voting starts 45 days before that Tuesday, and that's all voting day. Later in the dissent, the judge is like, yo, man, you know, by law, the law says on the Tuesday of election day, you can't serve on no jury. The courts are closed. So if that was true, then all that would have to be true for a month and a half before that Tuesday. They try to address it in the majority opinion, but it sounds like a stupid, they should have just said, look, we white nationalists and we didn't like the results. And they even include in the majority opinion, the margin by which the referendum passed. And then they say, well, it doesn't matter whether it was more or less. Why did you bring it up? You political hacks. So what do? I think they should ignore it. Are they going to ignore it? Nah, they ain't going to ignore it. They probably going to go around and say, okay, no, well, we can't do nothing about it. But guess what? That just means instead of 10-1, it's 6-5. Democrats, white nationalists in terms of leaning. But watch this. Does anybody not believe that if everybody who is eligible to vote registers, and that if most of those people show up, including almost all the black people, that those 5 Republican seats going to remain 5? It may go down to 1 anyway. It may be 2, but it won't be 5. I promise you that on my mama, on my hood. My point is that if we vote our numbers, we can convert the gerrymander to a dummy mander, and that's if it survives scrutiny, because now the Attorney General said, I'm going to the feds. Now, we know the MAGA 6, we know the rocket docket. They are likely to say, we're going to uphold the Virginia Supreme Court, or we won't intervene because that's not justiciable. Then I'm turning around and saying, you let them do it in Texas. If you let Florida, which also has a nonpartisan, who has in their Florida Constitution that they can't do that. If you let them turn around and do what they did in Virginia and you don't intervene, or you don't decide that you're not going to intervene, let me pause. If the Supreme Court of the United States, if the federal government says that Virginia, what they did, Virginia Supreme Court, is non-justiciable, they can't get involved. And then Florida turns around and do what Virginia did, when in the Florida Constitution, like in the Virginia Constitution, they're saying, well, in Virginia, they got a nonpartisan redistricting committee. In Florida, they said you can't engage in that kind of thing. And DeSantis has already admitted that he knows it's unconstitutional. And the Supreme Court turns around and says in that instance, oh yeah, that can pass, that can go. Y'all have destroyed the notion of the rule of law in this country. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Because what you haven't realized about us, as Roy Wood Jr. would say, said in the opening of this, what you haven't realized is we don't give a damn about your funky illusion. There are some blacks who do. God bless y'all. There's a wonderful speech at Howard University's College of Arts and Sciences recognition ceremony on Thursday, sitting there with Shanice, Mario, Betty. We all got our robes and stuff sitting there. Shanice has a beautiful robe, this black robe with this kente that she hand sewed herself. And I'm like, look at that. This is my girl. So anyway, but we sitting there, and an elder who had a long career in the NSA? She worked for the Department of Defense in intelligence. Had top secret clearance. And I'm looking at this black woman, clearly an achiever. And I'm like, this is great. And I'm saying, now, why do we have somebody from the Department of Defense? I say, hey, I know where I work. But the beautiful thing about it is, shout out to all the graduates, because a number of the people, including a couple of the people who spoke, students who were graduating, who spoke from the podium, gave the invocation, made the comments on the class, their parents are in Nubia. Because I got a chance to meet them. as we came out of graduation. It was a beautiful thing. So I just want to say thank you, because even as we grapple with our young people, trying to help them and guide them and inform them and then get out of their way, understand that the generation who brought them into the world and who have seen them safely to this moment in their lives, many of them are here with us, and some of those young people as well. So at any rate, we understand that you're destroying the rule of law. And in destroying the rule of law, you're going to find out that we never believed in the rule of law if it meant us continuing to take the L. That we are fully prepared to move from the local level, from the relationship level, to build out in solidarity with those of common purpose. And out of that energy, we will break your political backs once and for all. And if you rise up out the grave, we'll break them again. We did it before, we did it again. Virginia is not lost because the Supreme Court of Virginia went MAGA. It will not be lost if we do what we need to do. And that certainly translates to the federal level, because, as I had to remind our brother Lamont, Senate seats are not gerrymandered. Supreme Court seats, when they are elected, are not gerrymandered. There are two candidates running right now for the Georgia Supreme Court. Early voting has started. It stops on the 15th of May. You got another 6 days to make sure that these two candidates are on the Georgia Supreme Court, because right now, 8 of the 9 people on the Georgia Supreme Court were appointed by white nationalist governors. Kemp got all these seats on the court, 8 of the 9 appointed by him. And you can switch out 2 of them in the next election. They got a rule in Georgia that says if a court justice resigns before the election, they can suspend the election. They can suspend the election. And the governor then gets to appoint. There was one guy who resigned in anticipation of the election, and then something happened. He's like, oh my God, this was a mistake. He begged the governor not to accept it. The governor, I got to accept it. So the guy killed himself. White nationalist judge. Terrible tragedy. But let's be crystal clear. You can stop. Anybody think one of these hillbillies won't say, well, I'm going to resign, and then Kemp, who's term limited, will appoint a replacement? Right now, early voting has started. And guess what? They can say early voting already started. And here's where I want to turn just for a second to Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson, because this week, the little nasty piece of work, Mr. Alito, I like Sam Alito, because he erases. What I wish he would be is a full-bred man instead of a piece of a man, and stop pretending like he's somehow upholding some kind of sanctity of the law. Because when you read the Virginia majority opinion I just got finished talking about, when you read the Virginia, they go back to the 18th century and they draw from common law and they come forward. Yeah, the dissent is like whatever. The plain language, the 4 corners of the document, the Virginia Constitution and the enabling statute are plain about what election day is. Y'all done redefine election and trying to put 4 people in the place of millions who voted for something. I'm telling you, Virginia politicians, House of Delegates, representatives, governor, y'all should ignore them. And the minute somebody tries to say something, you just say OHIO. That's how they do it at Ohio State. Not that I ever did it and will never do it again before, just beside clowning them. Let's look at the Supreme Court for a minute. I'm going to wind up for now. Calais versus Louisiana. This was last week. We talked about that, of course, the white supremacists. Now, mind you, in Virginia, the Virginia Supreme Court said they already started voting. So in Louisiana, they already started voting too. But see, the MAGA 6 on the Supreme Court of the United States of America, they don't have the courts. Let me be very clear. You got lower court judges that are fighting every day to uphold the rule of law. And if we do what we need to do, we're going to stop 2 of these racists, including the consensual manservant Clarence Thomas. We're going to stop them from being able to slither out the door and get some young bull replacements before the election of 2028, because I would be willing to bet a lot that them 2, if the white nationalists hold on to the United States Senate in the elections in November, them 2 going to try to resign before the election of 28, because Senate seats are not gerrymandered, whether it be Brown in Ohio, whether it be this cat out of Maine, Planter, who can take out, what's her name, Susan Collins. If you can get the Senate, not just 51, because you got to neutralize John Fetterman, who said he ain't leaving the Democratic Party because he's the plant. You got to get 52 or 53 probably. You can stop Alito and Thomas from retiring and then take care of business in 28. But if you don't win the Senate, them 2, they're going to try to flip them seats. Oh, trust me on that. All right, so let me go back to the point. Alito, purebred racist, he writes this nonsensical Calais opinion, and then comes back this week, and they got a rule at the Supreme Court that says after they've ruled and they've returned it to the lower court, they usually have a 32-day window. Not a window, a 32-day rule. We'll return it to you in just a little over a month. This MF, Alito, returns it to Louisiana a week after the decision because he's trying to hustle and hurry up so that these guys, these white nationalists in Louisiana who were already redrawing maps, can hasten and interrupt an ongoing election. Election day in Louisiana is still election day, but they've already started early voting. So people have already voted. Their votes haven't been counted yet because unlike the stupid, not stupid, I won't call them stupid, they knew damn well what they were doing. Virginia Supreme Court, anybody counting no votes because votes are counted on election day. You know what election day is? I know you know, but you made up a lie. All right, back to the Supreme Court. Here's Calais. This is what Alito writes. He says, to permit the losing party time to file a petition for rehearing, the clerk of court ordinarily waits 32 days after the entry of the court's judgment to send the opinion and a certified copy of the judgment to the clerk of the lower court. 32 days. This is the Supreme Court Rule 45.3. This period is subject to adjustment. Oh, see, he slips it in. This period is subject to adjustment. The default applies, quote, unless the court or a justice shortens or extends the time. There's his authorizing language to do what he did. Sneaky. Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson in her dissent says it ain't been done but 2 times. Both times that she cited, which was the abortion case, the Dobbs case, and adoptive couple versus baby girl, which was a case where they was trying to take this indigenous baby from her daddy after her mom put her up for adoption without the father's knowledge, and this white couple had her. Then was the 2 other days they returned it within a shorter window. Ketanji was saying something in both those cases, by the way. He says, this period is subject to adjustment. The default applies, quote, unless the court or a justice shortens or extends the time. The Calais appellees have asked for the clerk to issue the judgment forthwith. This is the racists in Louisiana. Hurry up and do it, Sam. Hurry up and do it, Sam. So that, quote, in the event of a judicial remedy, end quote, the district court may, quote, oversee an orderly process. This is from the appeal, page 3. Appellant Louisiana does not oppose this application. And while the Robinson appellants oppose it, they have not expressed any intent to ask this court to reconsider its judgment. Yeah, 32 days. And see what Sam has done now is really, I must give him credit for this. Alito has marshaled his considerable powers as a superhero to look into the mind of the people to discern that they have not expressed any intent. Come on, man. It's usually a month, bruh. Thus, he writes, the application to issue the judgment forthwith presented to Justice Alito and by him referred to the court is granted. Justice Alito with Justice Thomas and Justice Gorsuch join, concurring. Where them other 2? They want to put their face on it. The other 3. Where Beer Kavanaugh, where the handmaid Comey Barrett, and where is the upside down frown John Roberts, the man who started all this mess with Citizens United. The man's been hot after the Voting Rights Act since he was a wet behind the ears lawyer writing them crazy ass memos for the Reagan administration. The man, for when you read that book that I referred you all to about John Roberts, you see that he is enamored with and backed by in his ascent everybody from Lewis Powell. Remember Lewis Powell? Powell, the one wrote the Powell memo that was saying we got to organize around this Christianity and around this capitalism and get this thing going, and we need a think tank. Then the birth of the Heritage Foundation comes after that. And Powell is the one who wrote the opinion in the, who was the vote in the opinion on the Bakke case, where the white man out there at University of California, I think it was Davis, medical school, said somebody not white got my seat, and they were less than qualified. And they destroy affirmative action or begin the destruction by saying it's about inclusion or not inclusion. It's about affirmative action is about it's not about remedying historical past discrimination against Black people. It's about diversity. This is Powell, the same Powell. It's also the same Powell. Well, Powell who did that in Bakke. And then remember, the Justice Department, as I said a minute ago, is now suing UCLA, saying that a white man is saying that you got my seat. even by the way, as the Department of Justice was it EEOC? No, EEOC is suing the New York Times now because some white man said he's supposed to be an editor at the New York Times and he didn't get that job because one of you non-whites got it. So all of the weapons are forming. It's a beautiful thing, and they are taking a ball to the concept of the rule of law. Now, back to where I was raising. Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch join together in this dissent that Alito writes. You want to know how Ketanji Brown Jackson stung this racist? Because this is Alito. He's a nasty piece of work. He opens his dissent with the following line. The dissent in this suit, he's talking about Ketanji, Justice Jackson, he says, the dissent in this suit levels charges that cannot go unanswered. Well, you ain't going to answer them. Y'all read the dissent, you see he doesn't answer them. He goes on and says, this dissent would require that the 2026 congressional elections in Louisiana be held under a map that has been held to be unconstitutional. MF. Had that fight in 2028. You sped this up because you want these people to finish their work. I'm not even going to read any more of the opinion here. It's not opinion. It was a short writing. In fact, his little writing comes to about 2 pages. He says the dissent goes on to claim, I'll skip forward, that our decision represents an unprincipled use of power. That is a groundless and utterly irresponsible charge. He gonna call her irresponsible. This is a straight old white man talking to a black woman. Crazy. He says, what principle has the court violated? He writing this in his, he says, the principle that Rule 43.3 32-day default period should never be shortened, even when there is good reason to do so. What's the good reason? Because you want your racist friends to get that map redrawn, even though voting has already started. He says the principle that we should never take any action that might unjustifiably be criticized as partisan. This is, you could put this under the HDH rule. Hit dog holler. This is Sam Hit Dog hollering. The last line he says, the dissent accuses the court of unshackling itself from constraints. It is the dissent's rhetoric that lacks restraint. So what is he pissed off about? Let's read just for a second. I'm going to close out. Supreme Court of the United States, Philip Calais et al. Applicants versus Louisiana et al. On application to issue the judgment forthwith. May the 4th, 2026. This was Monday. Justice Jackson dissenting. Come on, Ketanji. Justice Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson writes the following. The court's decision in these cases has spawned chaos in the state of Louisiana. Louisiana's primary elections were scheduled to take place on May 16th, 2026. That would be next week. Accordingly, the state mailed ballots to overseas and military voters on April the 1st and to other voters who qualified to vote by mail on April 26th. By April 29th, the date on which the court released its decision holding that Louisiana's current congressional map is an unconstitutional gerrymander, some Louisiana voters had already mailed back their filled-in ballots the very next day. She writes, Louisiana's governor declared that Calais, quote, effectively revives, in quote, the lower court's prior injunction against the current electoral map, and suspended the ongoing primary elections for seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. For its part, the 3-judge court below declared that, due to Calais, Louisiana will be afforded the opportunity to enact a constitutionally compliant map right now for the purpose for the election in progress, and ordered the state to file a brief, quote, outlining how it intends to comply with, in quote, the Calais decision within 3 days. She says, apparently, neither the governor nor the 3-judge court viewed themselves as limited by the fact that this court had yet to identify it. Let me pause here. Let me slow down because I'm almost done. So she says, apparently neither the governor, said punk ass Jeff Landry, who they're going to recall, whether they succeed or not isn't the point. Organize, get that muscle up because you're going to break his political back in these elections coming up. Neither the governor nor the 3-judge court viewed themselves as limited by the fact that this court, the Supreme Court, had yet to issue its certified judgment in these cases. In the ordinary course, we do not do so until at least 32 days after the opinion is released. This is session 322. Ancestors got jokes. See this court's rule, 45.3. So, new litigation followed. A candidate and Louisiana voters who had already submitted their ballots filed suits against the governor and the Secretary of State, another white nationalist, asserting that whatever might happen to Louisiana's congressional map in the future, Then she says, this election, and this is in italics, is already underway and must continue pursuant to the current maps. And then she's got several Supreme Court cases that she is citing here, and a couple of district court cases, one district court case. She says, meanwhile, to facilitate Louisiana's midstream redistricting rush, appellees now ask us to expedite release of the certified judgment in Calais. These post-Calais developments have a strong political undercurrent. Louisiana's hurried response to the Calais decision unfolds in the midst of an ongoing statewide election, against the backdrop of a pitched redistricting battle among state governments that appear to be acting as proxies for their favorite political parties. And she puts a footnote in here, footnote 2. She says, by my count, we have granted an application to issue the judgment forthwith over a party's objection. And here's what I said, only twice in the past 25 years. That was the whole Women's Health versus Jackson and the adoptive couple versus baby girl. To avoid the appearance of partiality here, we could, as per usual, opt to stay on the sidelines and take no position by applying our default procedures. But today, she writes, the court chooses the opposite. Look at Sam, you racist. Not content to have decided the law. Here's a bar right here. Y'all ready? Not content to have decided the law. It now takes steps to influence its implementation. Eesh. The court's decision to buck our usual practice under Rule 45.3 and issue the judgment forthwith is tantamount to an approval of Louisiana's rush to pause the ongoing election in order to pass a new map. She writes, and make no mistake, She says that course of action does not follow from the Calais decision itself. The question whether our decision should affect the map to be used in the ongoing primaries, ongoing italics, raises a host of legal and political questions that are entirely independent of the issue in Calais. Among the legal ones, there is the court's previous insistence that, even at the cost of letting partisan gamesmanship corrupt our democracy, she uses the Rousseau versus Common Cause case. I've talked about that before. Courts should not risk assuming political responsibility for a partisan map drawing process that often produces ill will and distrust. Here's where she finishes. She says, there's also the so-called Purcell principle, which we invoked only 5 months ago to chide a federal district court for improperly inserting itself into an active primary campaign. Abbott versus League of United American Citizens. We talked about the Lulak case before. Last paragraph, she says, the court unshackles itself. This is what pissed off little racist Sam. The court unshackles itself from both constraints today and dives into the fray. And just like that, she writes, those principles give way to power. Because this abandon is unwarranted and unwise, respectfully, I dissent. That was what we saw today out of the Supreme Court. For those of you who say, both parties are the same, Supreme Court, you should be quiet. As Mr. Farrakhan told Mike Wallace, oh, now, Mr. Uninformed, Ms. Uninformed, you should be quiet. Because this is why you have elections, to put people in place who can put the brakes on these criminal enterprises. So today, in this season of graduation days, we show our cautious optimism, it seems to me, about us growing up and beginning to see this and use this momentum of memory to fuel a renewed political maturity. If Louisiana gets those maps through and redraws them, and y'all saw all the living congressmen got up and testified, my man Gary Chambers, very moving testimony today before this week before the Louisiana legislature. If that is unsuccessful, my question is, how big is LSU's athletic budget? And when the tide turns, how will African families raise different children? To say, I'm not going to play down there. I deal every day with students. They got to be surrounded by families. There's an unevenness in how we make these decisions. As they fund ballrooms or try to fund ballrooms at $1 billion of your money and paint the damn reflecting pool bottom blue. People like Peter Thiel, y'all saw it was in the Financial Times on Tuesday, said that they're trying to build AI islands powered by the ocean waves outside of any jurisdiction of any country in international waters. They try to create policies beyond the capacity of anybody to regulate them. Understand that we are in a moment now where we can make a different set of decisions and actually get very close to doing some work. On the political front in the United States, that means turning as many gerrymanders as they're trying to do into dummy manders in Alabama, in Tennessee, in South Carolina, in Florida. Challenging them in the courts and say, you violated the Florida Constitution and your own governor said that you've done it. In Maryland, this man, Bill Ferguson, this guy over the Senate, the leader of the Senate, white dude who's saying we're not going to gerrymander, it's time to get in his ass. He in Baltimore. It's time to say, man, we got to vote you out. We got to get you out the paint. This criminal enterprise has got some serious flaws, and we can look at the full arc of the enterprise from the original racial gerrymander, which is the Electoral College, to now, and understand as, what's my man, Alan Lichtman. I've been telling Sam, man, when you going, but I'm going to email Lichtman myself. This is his book, Conservative at the Core, A New History of American Conservatism. Alan Lichtman, the guy who predicts the elections. Alan Lichtman is saying in this book that, let me just tell you what he says. He's looking at the history over the last century from World War I, really some of the same stuff that Du Bois is covering. And he says, contrary to those who have described Trump as a deviation from professed core principles, Conservative at the Core ultimately argues that Trump and his allies represent the culmination of the American conservative tradition, consistently upholding and fulfilling conservative nationalist values. He says their values trump, no pun intended, anything else. They do not believe in free enterprise, limited government, fiscal responsibility, states' rights, law and order, personal morality, and American sovereignty. He calls them dispensable notions solely for public appeal. He says instead, conservatives have only consistently advanced their version of traditional Christian values and support for private, not free, enterprise. This is Lichtman, and he's got this thing that's stuffed with data. My point is that we have to understand where we are and move accordingly. What are our sources of power? Our sources of power are economic. Athletes, entertainers, decide where you want to go. That same Ray Charles said Georgia in My Mind was banned from Georgia. Remember, for years, because he said I'm not performing in front of segregated crowds. So Jamie Harrison, you doing good. Catch up, brother. Keep going. Political, we have the power. Organize so that these gerrymanders, some of them we can flip to dummy manders while we're fighting in the court. Ask about that. That's why I asked Representative Jones about what's the swing if they get away. He said 20%. My numbers say 9 to 36%. On the far end, 36. On the close, 9 after this previous election. And that's with everybody not voting. Justin Pearson worried about Memphis. Man, get them guys out to vote. Get them women out to vote. You know how abysmal the voter turnout is in Memphis? Let's do this differently. And meanwhile, as the world goes on, we realize that the United States of America has peaked as a world power, and we can now form and make this move. Next week, I'm going to spend some time talking about Steve Phillips' new book. I've been in contact with Brother Phillips. We're going to be talking this week. Are White Men Smarter Than Everybody Else? This is a great book. This book right here, where he's talking about, he's coined a term, straight white American male preference, the swamp, where he says, and he's got a whole, the book is about 250 pages long, a little bit over. And he's writing about how you can go about breaking the power of these white nationalists with some very, very practical, data-driven points and things I'll go into next week in some detail. So we'll pause from there for now and pick up on the other end next week. I'm trying to think what I did with the, wait, I don't see you. Oh, here you are. Let me put this back in so we don't have an echo.
No, I just want to mention the reading of the Dissent of Ketanji Brown Jackson. I was riding around thinking about her. Say nothing that we are talking about animates people to show up in November or in 2028, and she ends up being the only one on the court. I was thinking about, first of all, the pressure of that, but then I was thinking about previously in the previous Reconstruction era, there was never a Ketanji Jackson Brown on the court, never somebody. And reading that dissent, what's the importance, the impact of her writing those dissents for 100 years from now?
Well, that's a great question, Prof. 100 years out, I'm not sure there'll be anything we will recognize as a country, but I'll say this. But the importance of her writing that, actually, that's a great question and a great observation of the importance by asking the question. You already know the answer. Let's go from 100 years out to 5 years out. Let's say that Brown wins in Ohio, Planter wins in Maine, you flip a couple more seats, and they're able to stop Alito and Thomas from retiring. Then in 28, you break whoever the white nationalists going to run out there, because I'm not at all convinced they're not going to try to get a third term for Trump, but then it'll be complete chaos. It won't matter. My point is this. Let's say you get a Democratic president in 28 and you hold the Senate and the House. And then Alito and Thomas, they're going to try to hold on. But if you get a big enough majority, you can put something like term limits. There's no rule against term limits in the Supreme Court, in the Constitution. You can get all that done. But point is this. Let's say Alito and Thomas can't hang on another 4 years. There's one thing about Thomas. He is a black man. He may not act like one, but bruh, diabetes is real. Stroke, cancer, all that. Anyway, point is this. Let's say that Thomas comes off the bench. I'm not wishing anything on him. I hope he live 100 years. But the point is this. Let's say that Thomas comes off the bench after 28, or Alito. A Democratic president, a president Ocasio-Cortez, or a president Booker, or a president whoever, nominates Ketanji Onyeka Brown-Jackson to be the Chief Justice. No. It would have to be Roberts retired to get that. So we'd have to see. But let's see that you get a seat. And then a few years later, let's say now you're 5 years out. So from 26, that would be 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. Maybe Roberts comes off because Roberts getting old. You put Ketanji in as the Chief Justice. If you can maintain that hold on the presidency and the both two houses, those dissents become the foundation for majority opinions. See, this is the whole purpose of writing a dissent. You don't write a dissent for today. Remember, Justice Harlan in Plessy versus Ferguson writes the dissent that becomes the foundation for the majority opinion in Brown versus Board of Education. And Plessy was 1896. Brown was 1954. It wasn't even 100 years. It was actually 58 years later. That was 58 years. I don't think it's going to take 100 years if we do what we need to do. Now, here's the other scenario. Let's say we don't do nothing. Okay. So all of my revolutionary friends, and this is to all y'all about to be mad. I know there's going to be some videos that's going to clip this, so let me get it real clear. We're going to find out how many of y'all can really shoot. Because here's the problem you have. We're not going to take a L either way. So the best thing to do is to organize, to vote, to just all these cats that say, I don't vote for nobody. Okay, we're going to find out how really tight your gangster is. When they roll in your grandma's house and start slapping her around, we're going to find out if you're a man or not. The best thing would be to do is to vote and get your grandma to the poll. But since you want to do it the other way, listen, you, Karen Hunter, me, Greg Carr, put us together, mash us together. We ain't got no money to buy no island or no some floating Peter Thiel. However, we got enough money to get a plane ticket, and we got friends outside the United States. Now, y'all you Negroes talking about y'all ain't voting, you can't go nowhere. So you can make a decision now that will prevent you from having to make another kind of decision in a minute. I don't think it's going to be 100 years. Well, this could be turned significantly different in 5. And that's why you write a dissent. That's why Jack, and in fact, let me just say this. She taught a class this year at Howard Law School, a 1 credit hour class. Some of the students in her class were in my class this semester. I didn't even know till they told me back in January. Wow. She taught a class. You know the title of that class, Professor Karen Hunter? Writing Dissents. You see that? She thinking long range. No, let me train them now because we're going to flip this if we do what we need to do. So I need some students to be very clear. Oh, man, it's a beautiful thing, Prof. If we do what we need to do, we're going to look back and say, this is the moment we stood up and became the generation that can now proudly link our names to Ida B. Wells and the rest of them. You know what I'm saying?
That's the point, right? This is a strategy, long-term, not reaction.
No.
But action, pro-action.
That's right.
We got this. And fortunately, so many people, I'm rereading Radical Equations. There were so many people, so many areas that did all of the groundwork. All we got to do is pick up the books and remember. That's all we got to do. And talk to some of them still here. Talk to the elders.
Some of them still here. Dave Dennis still here. Remember, Dave wrote in fact, Charlie Cobb is still here. Radical Equations, when we read it for Philadelphia Freedom Schools, we couldn't get Bob Moses to come. He was working on algebra project stuff. He eventually came a couple of years later to talk with our young people. But the year we read his book, he co-wrote that with his colleague, his comrade, Charlie Cobb. We got Dave Dennis. They sent Dave Dennis to come talk to the Freedom School students. Dave Dennis still around. His son, sports writer, famous. Dave Dennis was ducking bullets in Mississippi with Charlie Cobb and Bob Moses. Charlie Cobb is still around. You're absolutely right. And for young people, these were young women and men. They in their 20s, most of them. James Foreman, they considered to be the old man because he was in his 30s. You're absolutely right.
You bring up Dennis. Roy Wood, well, I'm gonna play it again. His dad, Dave Chappelle, his mom, like the children of some of these people are very provocative right now, and they may be doing things that you think are frivolous, comedy, or whatever, but imbued in them is something that may be dormant, but it's there. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming next. So
let me ask you, Prof, before we go. I know you're gonna play it. No, thank you. I want to ask you, when have you you haven't done the thing with DeMario, have you? Solomon Simmons?
No. You mean what thing? Down in
Are you supposed?
Tulsa?
No. Before Juneteenth, I'm talking about. Are you supposed to be in conversation with him? Because I know.
Yeah, no, he'll be on, and he'll be on the show next week. I think Tuesday.
Okay, very good. That's what I was thinking. I know the book drops Tuesday, and I know I got it to his people reached out. I think I told you on Wednesday night at 7 here at one of our Black-owned bookstores at Mahogany Books in National Harbor. We're going to be talking about his book, Redeem a Nation, Century-Long Battle to Restore the Soul of America. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation with him because, they do this. They got this thing with the indigenous people and the freedmen. And so I'm sure there are going to be some ADOS people there. If you're coming, ADOS, I'm very much looking forward to seeing you. In fact, I want to make sure it's recorded because I'm going to grab you by the political and intellectual wrist, and you're going to get this whipping. And if DeMario try to get in the way, he might get a little wrecked too. So I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to this. No, I know he's not going to. But I mean, if DeMario no better than that. But and then Thursday I'll be up that way in Newark. My man Akil Kalfani at Essex County College. The Africana Center is celebrating its 25th anniversary. And I hadn't forgotten. These things are almost time released in my mind, but I know I'll be up there Thursday. I think it's at 7 o'clock. Y'all can look it up to be there. Yeah. I might defend, maybe. But good to see. And then maybe at some point we can talk about August Wilson. We'll see. Because I
thought we were going to start off talking about it, but maybe
next week we can talk about it because I was rereading Joe Turner, and we got to get your thoughts here too, because I know they've been all over the internet. So
it was a pleasure, and I probably, as I told you, would not have gone if you didn't mention it. So thank you.
We blaming Mike in Nubia, so you got to see it. And then we was talking. This is the new. I'm putting this on the people in Nubia, Prof, to drug us out to the Barrymore. You know what I'm saying?
Out in the streets, out in the streets, y'all.
In the streets.
Right. Yes, I am so grateful to be here with you. This is
same here.
It's life altering.
Yes, I agree. Same here.
I'm sure we both thought about the work that we do, it being impactful, but I never thought I would be well, actually, that's a lie. I knew I would be living in a time such as this, and I think in many ways, the preparation. Okay, you're right. We're ready.
We're ready. Well, what do you always remind us when you click on one of them YouTube videos and you see Fannie Lou Hamer walking in and you hear the Attorney General of the state of New York? We're ready. You got us right there. It's a beautiful thing. So,
all right, let's finish with our brother.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Hey, everyone, have a great weekend. Dr. Carr, love you.
Love you too. See y'all Monday night in Nubia, first 4 chapters of Second Emancipation.